ఏంది వచ్చేస్తున్నారు? ఎవరు రమ్మన్నారు మిమ్మల్ని? నా పర్మిషన్ లేదు కదా. 140 నుంచి మీరు నా కంట్రోల్లో ఉండాలి. మాట్లాడద్దు, ఓన్లీ వర్క్.
Hello. I hope you can hear me, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we will start. A very good afternoon to all the participants. For this session, we have with us Dr. Subramani as the guest speaker. Before he starts his talk, let me take the privilege to introduce him. Dr. M. Subramani is currently working as an assistant professor in the Department of Science and Humanities, IITM Kanchipuram. He has completed his PhD from Chennai Mathematical Institute, Chennai. After his PhD, he spent around 2 years as a postdoctoral fellow at the Harishchandra Research Institute, Allahabad. His research interests are analytic number theory, algebraic number theory, and mathematical cryptography. He has many conferences and journals to his credit. With this small introduction, I hand over the session to Dr. Subramani.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, you can share your screen, sir.
Sure.
Sir, little bit zoom. Hello, sir.
Yes, sir. Excellent.
Yeah, please zoom it little bit. Yes, it's visible, but you told something you will write on the right-hand side, no, sir?
Yes, sir. I'm sharing that.
Okay, okay.
Yes, sir. So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, correct. Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Over to you.
yes. Yeah. So good afternoon to all. So today we will discuss about foundations of cryptography, and most specifically the mathematical foundations of cryptography. And these were my references. So the contents are from these books. So I always prefer the second one, An Introduction to Mathematical Cryptography by Silverman, Hofstein, and Piper for any mathematical related concepts related to cryptography. And the third one, Neil Koblitz, A Course in Number Theory and Cryptography. So I'll start with the definition of a cryptography. So what is cryptography? So cryptography is a study of techniques to send message in disguised form so that the only intended recipient can read the message. So only the intended can read and others should not read the message. So the techniques to send the message in disguised form is called cryptography. And what's a plain text? And plain text is a message what we want to send. And ciphertext, the message is in disguised form. The plain text, which is in disguised form, is called a ciphertext. And the encryption is a process of converting a plain text to ciphertext. And decryption is a process of converting a ciphertext to plain text. So we want to study how to encipher messages. That means how to convert a plain text into ciphertext. And also we want to see how to decrypt the message, how to reverse the function, getting a plain text from the ciphertext. Let's start with the old and very basic crypto system. Caesar cipher, we call it as a Caesar cipher or Swift cipher. Okay, so let's see how it works. Suppose we want to send a message, enemy falling back. So in this method, so what we do, we first write each letter from the message. We distinguish each letter from the message. And for each letter, suppose I write English alphabets from left to right, and I shift each letter by 5 places to the right. For example, after E, we have F, G, H, I, J. Therefore, I replace E by J. And N, I replace after N, M, O, P, Q, R, S. So S is the 5th place after N. So I replace N by S. And similarly, I replace E by J and M by R and Y by D and so on. So here, the technique which I use to convert a plain text to a ciphertext is shifting. That means I shift each letter to the right of 5 places. So if I have this message, if I send this message, J, S, J, R, D, K, F, Q, Q, N, S, L, G, F, H, P, it is difficult to read. There is no meaning at all. It is difficult to read. So it is a, so it's a example of a process converting a plain text to a ciphertext. That is called encipher. If someone received that message, to get back the original one, they just want to shift each letter in the ciphertext to the left of 5 places, to the left hand side by 5 places. As I said earlier, if J appears after E in 5 places, therefore J should be converted to E, and S should be M, and J should be E, and R should be M, and so on. By using this conversion, we have the original plain text, which is enemy falling back. So it is a very simple cipher, shifting cipher or Caesar cipher we call, to encrypt a plain text into ciphertext. But as we already guessed, there is no security in this, because so how many ways we can shift a given letter? Maximum we can shift in 25 ways, because there are 26 letters in English alphabet. We can shift each letter by maximum in 25 possible ways. So if we use this cipher to encrypt our message, so it is just a millisecond to decode the message. So any computer, or we just need to check only 25 options to find the key. So there is no security and all, but it is a good example to see how enciphering and deciphering works. So how do we define a cryptography or cryptographic protocol, so that it is difficult for the third person to decrypt the message? So because we don't want the third person to decrypt our messages. The general philosophy in this, converting any given plain text message into a mathematical object and do the operation define functions on the mathematical objects, so that the security is preserved. Okay, so we start with the very basic mathematical object called modulo arithmetic. So let M be an integer, and for any integer A and B, any integer A, B are called concurrent modulo M if A minus B is divisible by M. So we write like this: A concurrent to B modulo M, to say that A and B are concurrent to each modulo M. For example, if I take M equal to 12, my 6 and if I take my A is equal to M is equal to 12, and A is equal to 1 and B is equal to 13, then it is very clear that A is concurrent to 13 modulo 12, because A minus B is equal to minus 12, which is divisible by 12. Okay. And moreover, we can define any two integers modulo 12. So how do we define addition modulo 12? Suppose if we have two integers A and B, to define the addition in modulo 12, you just add those numbers. Here 6 and 9, you add 6 plus 9, we have 15, and then get the remainder by dividing 12. So divide 15 by 12 and get the remainder. So that is the addition we get for A plus B. And similarly, if we have A is equal to 2 and B is equal to minus 3, to add these two numbers, the procedure is add A and B, get the result, which is minus 1 here, and find an element which is concurrent to minus 1 modulo 12. So here, because we have minus 1, which is concurrent to 11 modulo 12. Therefore, when A is equal to 2 and B is equal to minus 3, our A plus B is 11 modulo 12. So with this, we introduce a notation. We read it as Z modulo M is Z. So we read the symbol as Z modulo M is Z. So our Z modulo M is Z is a set of all elements of all integers from 0, 1, 2, 3 up to m minus 1. As the addition we defined before, for any two numbers a and b in the set z modulo m z, we can add a plus b. Just add a plus b and divide by m, get the remainder. That is the addition a plus b in this set z modulo m z. And similarly, we can multiply also. We can multiply any two elements in z modulo m z. So how do we multiply? Same procedure. Suppose we have two integers in z modulo m z. To multiply two integers in this set, we multiply as usual a into b and then divide ab by integer m and get the remainder. So that is the addition, that is the multiplication ab modulo m. For example, so let's take m equal to 5, and if you take m equal to 5, then my z by m z is the set 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I have 0, 1, 2, 3 up to 4. And so I form a table for the addition. So how do we add? So by the procedure explained before, we can see that we can add any two elements in z over m z. Here, z over 4 z. For example, if you want to add 3 and 4, you add 3 plus 4, which is 7, which is 3. Yeah, so which is 3 plus, so it is addition, right? 3 plus 4, which is 7. So 7 model, which is 4 plus 4. 16. Oh, actually, m equal to 5. So sorry for that. So I take m equal to 5. Take m equal to 5. Therefore, my z by 5 z is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is z over m. So now if we add 3 and 4, so 3 plus 4 is 7. If we divide 7 by 5, we get remainder 2. So that is the addition between 3 and 5. And similarly, we can multiply two elements in z over 5z, z modulo 5z. For example, if I want to multiply 4 and 4, we multiply as usual. You get 16, we get 16, and then divide 16 by 5, we get the remainder 1. So that is the multiplication of 4 into 4 in z modulo 5z. Yeah. So this example shows that for any integer m, we can consider this set z modulo m z, which is the collection of all integers of the form, collection of all integers 0, 1, 2, 3 up to m minus 1. And for any two elements in this set, we can add a plus b and multiply a into b. Any two elements can be multiplied and we can find the addition of a. Okay. Next, we move to the well-known algorithm called Euclidean algorithm. So suppose we have two integers a and b, and a is bigger. So we apply the Euclidean algorithm for a and b step by step. We first divide a by b and get the quotient q1 and remainder r2. And then once we are done, if r2 is non-zero, then we divide b by r2. We get the quotient q2 and remainder r3. And then in the third step, we divide the divider by the remainder, which is we divide r2 by r3. We get the quotient q3 and remainder r4. The next step, we divide the divider by the remainder in the previous step. That means divide r3 by r4. We get the quotient q4 and remainder r5. So we can see that these R2 and R3, R4, they are decreasing sequence of integers. They decrease because R2 is bigger than B, R2 is less than B, and R3 is less than R2. So we get B here, and we get R2 will be here, and R3 is less than R2, and then R4 we have here, and we have R5, and so on. And because B is a fixed integer, this sequence cannot go forever. So there should be some, this algorithm should stop somewhere. That means there should be a step where we get a zero remainder. If we have a strictly decreasing sequence of integers, then the sequence should terminate at some point. So here that means that the algorithm should stop at certain point. And we choose a last non-zero remainder. So that is the GCD between A and B. So this algorithm teaches us to find the GCD of A and B. Because the finding GCD of A and B plays a very crucial role in many important cryptographic protocols. So finding GCD of A and B is equivalent to many important problems. So this algorithm says that if we have A and B, we apply the addition algorithm recursively, and because we know that algorithm should terminate after some time, then we choose the last non-zero remainder, and that last non-zero remainder is the GCD of A and B. Of course, this is a theoretical one. What about the complexity? So, and we can see that equivalent algorithm, the complexity of the equivalent algorithm is in polynomial, so it can be found easily. So if A is bigger, if you consider log A to the power 3. So the complexity of this procedure is log A to the power 3. So log A is very small compared to A, and we just cube it once. Therefore, the complexity of the algorithm is good. So we can find the integer GCD A and B by using this algorithm. Okay. And also, there is one important observation we can make by these recursive algorithms, recursive steps. What is that? Let's explain that by an example. So suppose let's take an integer A equal to 2024, and let's take an integer B equal to 748. What I do, I mimic the previous step. I divide the integer A by B. So I get the quotient 2, remainder 528. And in the next step, I divide the divider, which is 748 by 528. We get the quotient 1 and remainder 220. And continuing in this way, so we get 44 as a last non-zero remainder. And as the reason explained before, 44 is the GCD of the integers 224, so 2024 and 748. And the one important observation is the following. So let's rewrite this equation 1. Let's rewrite this equation 1. So if you rewrite this equation 1, I have 528 is equal to A minus 2 times B, because my A is 2024 and my B is 748. That is my, so my first equation can be rewritten as this. I call it as the fifth equation. Now what I do, I substitute this fifth equation. I substitute this new equation in second. And that means I substitute for 520, I substitute 522, 528 here. For 528, I substitute A minus 2B in 2. By substituting that, we get this new equation. 220 equal to minus A plus 3B. I call it as a sixth equation. Then what I do, I collect the fifth equation and the sixth equation and substitute in 3. So I substitute for 528, I substitute this equation. For 220, I substitute this equation. Substituting that and simplifying, I get 88 equal to 3A minus 4B. And then I consider the sixth one and seventh one, and substituting in the fourth equation. Substituting in the fourth equation, that means I substitute for 220 and also I substitute for 88. If I do that, what we get is 44 is equal to minus 7 times A plus 19 times B. So remember, our 44 is the GCD of between A and B. So now our GCD can be expressed as a linear combination of minus 7 times A plus 19 times B. So this previous algorithm will not does not only guarantee the GCD between the two integers, it also expresses the GCD in terms of the given integers A and B, which is very crucial to us in the cryptographic applications. Let's, for example, suppose your P is a prime number. Suppose your P is a prime number. Suppose your P is a prime number. Then let's take an integer less than P minus 1. Okay, let's take an integer between 1 and P minus 1. And because P is a prime number, the GCD between A and P should be 1. Because P is a prime number, there is only the divisor of P is only 1 and P. And because A is less than P, therefore P should not divide A. Therefore, the only common divisor of A and P should be 1. Therefore, the GCD of A and P should be 1. So by applying the previous Euclidean algorithm for this equation, we say that there exists, we can find X and Y, some integers, so that AX plus BP equal to 1. AX plus BP equal to 1 by applying our Euclidean algorithm recursively. So this holds for every prime P, and for any integer less than P minus 1, there is all X and Y. There is always two integers X and Y, so that AX plus BY, PY is equal to 1. Okay. So what is the application of Euclidean? That's one application. So I recall that. So the application of Euclidean algorithm is the following. For any integers A and B, two positive integers, and let D be the GCD of A and B. Suppose D is the greatest common divisor of A and B. Then application of the above Euclidean algorithm is we can find two integers X and Y so that AX plus BY equal to 2. That means, in other words, the above equation, this equation always has a solution in integers X and Y. For example, let's recall the above definition. Above example, when A is equal to 024 and B equal to 748, we have X equal to minus 7, Y is equal to 90. So that 44 becomes linear combination of A and B. Okay. Now I introduce another symbol, which is we call Z over Z modulo M is Z star. So what is Z modulo M is Z star? So by definition, which is a set of all integers from in the set Z modulo M is Z, and GCD between A and M should be 1. By definition, this Z modulo M is Z star is a collection of all integers A between 1 and M minus 1, and the GCD between A and M should be 1. So this is the collection. And by the way, so you suppose I have an element in this collection. So what will happen by this example, we can always find X and Y so that AX plus PY equal to 1. So by this example, by the above example, whenever any element A in this set, there exists X and Y integers such that AX plus BY equal to 1. And if you consider this equation modulo M, modulo P, what will happen in this kind of equation? So we have AX plus, this is PY. So if we consider modulo P, this becomes 1 because P divides PY. So therefore PY is 0 modulo P. Therefore we have AX is 1 modulo. So this one important application of algorithm says that this set Z divided by M is Z star, this collection of sets, this collection of all elements, this is a collection of all elements A, so that there is always an integer AX such that AX is 1 modulo P. So that means A always has a inverse modulo. Yeah. here I put it for P, you can replace P by M. So the same procedure works. Am I make sense here? Okay. So for example, if you take Z modulo 24 is Z star. So Z modulo 25 Z star is a collection of all integers from 1 to 23, which is co-prime to 24. So which is 1, 5, 7, 11, 13, 17, 19, and 23. Yeah. Yeah. Now we are done with mathematics. So we collected enough materials to revisit our Caesar cipher. So let's revisit our Caesar cipher. How to interpret that? So remember, in Caesar cipher or shift cipher, we shifted each alphabet by a fixed places. So here, what we do, we can think about the problem again. How do we do that? So here, instead of considering the integers as considering the characters A, B, C as it is, we name them. We name them from 0 to 25. We name them from 0 to 25 like this. So we name A by 0, B by 1, and C by 2, D by 3, and so on. So the Z will be named by 25. And then think about these numbers. What are we can see these numbers are 0 to 25. And remember, this is precisely the set what we constructed. Z over 26Z, which is collection of all 0, 1, 2, 3 up to 25. Therefore, by labeling the alphabets by integers, we can think of the integers as an element of this set, Z over 26Z. And then what we do to change a plain text into a ciphertext, we first consider the plain text characters and replace by equivalent integers. So E is 4. So our E is 4 and my N is 13 and so on. So I replace each character by equivalent integer. And then what I do, I write the plain text as it is. So my plain text becomes the sequence of integers. So to do the encryption, what I do, I just add by 5. I just add by 5 modulo 26. So once we renamed our characters by integers in 26, so to do the shift transformation, we just need to add corresponding plain text messages by 5. Therefore, here, so we get, if we add 4 by 5, we get 9. 13 by 5, we get 18. And 24 by 5, we get 29, but modulo 26, which is 3. So we do that addition in modulo 26. So this is our ciphertext now. So to send the message, we again write the equivalent characters for the ciphertext integers, and this is our ciphertext to send. So once our friend received the ciphertext, so immediately he transformed the ciphertext into an integer modulo 26, and then to do the deciphering, he subtract 5 modulo 26. For decryption, we just need to do add -5 modulo 26. So which is the procedure is the same. So we are exactly doing the Caesar cipher, but here we are playing with integers modulo 26. So it is convenient for us to write program because this is the arithmetic comes into the picture, and it is easy for us to do the calculations. So this is a basic philosophy here. So I repeat it again. What we did, we renamed the characters by mathematical objects, and then we do the operation on the mathematical objects, and we get a ciphertext. Once we get the ciphertext integers, and then we convert again, rename it to characters, and we send that as a ciphertext. So for deciphering, we again make it to integers and do the inverse function for the integers. We get the plain text. The same philosophy can be written like this. So thus we can write in this way. So we can very well think of our plain text as integers from 0 to 25. Any linear, our plain text are any string of integers from 0 to 25. And our ciphertext is any string of integers from 0 to 25. So our encryption function for the Caesar cipher, which is f of p is equal to p plus 5 modulo 26. And the corresponding decryption function is f inverse of c, which is c minus 5 modulo 26. So this is precisely the Caesar cipher what we studied before, but in a more sophisticated form. But as we discussed earlier, the Caesar cipher is not secure, so we need to find more secure crypto systems. So how do we do that? Let's make the job difficult. Let's make the function difficult. So hereafter, I always use, instead of 26, I always use n. So n can be any integer, because there is no guarantee that we should only use English characters. So we can add punctuations, spaces, and therefore the number of characters may increase. It depends on the situation. So I always use capital N to denote the number of plain text characters as well as the ciphertext characters. Okay. So in affine transformation, if we consider the plain text or characters from 0 to n minus 1, and my ciphertext or characters from 0 to n minus 1. Now what I do to define a ciphertext, I choose an integer in Z over n z star. I choose two integers A and B. Excuse me. So to define affine crypto system, so I choose two integers A and B, and A is in Z over n z star. So what does it mean? The integer A and capital N are co-prime to each other. The GCD between A and N are co-prime to each other, and B is any integer in Z over n z. And then I define a map from F from P to C, the script P to script C, by saying my f of P is equal to AP plus B modulo N. And this is my encryption key. This is my encryption key, and F inverse of C is my decryption key. So F inverse of C is equal to A inverse C plus minus A inverse B modulo N. So because this is, I mean, if I take A equal to 1 and B is equal to 5, we get the Caesar cipher. So which is a generalization of affine cipher is a generalization of shift cipher. So but we may ask the question, why A should be in Z by n z star? Why not in simply Z by n z? So we need to see, whenever we define a function from the plain text to the ciphertext, there should be an inverse for that. We should decipher it. We should be able to decipher that. To make sure that the inverse function exists, we should assume that A should be an element in Z over n z star. Otherwise, we cannot invert the function. The function will not have an inverse. So that is why we assume that A should be an integer co-prime to n. So whenever we have A and B and defining these functions in this way, we have a affine crypto system from previous. For example, let's do the affine transformation for an example. Let's take n equal 26 characters, and I take A equal to 7 and B equal to 3. Remember, my A is 7, which is co-prime to 26. You can see that I choose A in such a way that A and n are co-prime. So 7 and 26 are co-prime to each other. Now I define the function f of x by saying x goes to 7x plus 3, which is a map from the domain, the plain. This is my P and this is my C, from P to C. And the decryption function is, so A inverse Y minus A inverse B is 15y minus 90. So remember, when I write A inverse in modulo 26. So when I write A inverse here, A inverse, which is A is 7 inverse. So 7 inverse is not 1 by 7, which is 7 inverse of 7 modulo 26. So that means what is the 7 inverse is an integer, so that if we multiply with 7, we get 1 again. So it is easy to see that when we multiply 17, when you multiply 7 with 15, you get 1 modulo 26. Therefore, 15 is the inverse of 7. So that's why we get 15 here. And then if we multiply 15 and B3, we get 90. So that is f of x and the f inverse of x are example of affine filter system, affine encryption. So we can also check that f inverse. When we apply f and then applying f inverse, you get the plain text again. So we should get the plain text again. When we apply the function from P to C and then applying f inverse from C to P, we should get the same plain text again. So that should be an important property we should remember to define a filter system. So here it can be easily seen that for the f and f inverse, we have f, the f composition f inverse will get back to x again. Okay, so this affine crypto system is a little one step ahead of Caesar's ship cipher, but still there is no security in that, because remember my A and B my A is in Z divided by NEZ star and B is Z over NEZ. And it is, I mean, there are not many. So there are not many N. There are not many A and B. You just need to check for finitely many A and B to encrypt a message. So if our third party has this message, he or she just has to check very few integers for A and B. Okay, so now let's consider a advanced crypto system compared to the affine. So let's make the story little more difficult. So let's say Vigenère cipher. So in this cipher, what we do, so remember in all the ship ciphers, we replace each character by a corresponding number. Remember, we replace each character by a corresponding number. B by 1, and so we consider each of them, and we consider each of them as a single unit. So instead of that, so this is this is Vigenère ciphers recommend that to consider m alphabets at a time. So ship cipher we consider 1 alphabet at a time. So instead of here it says that you consider m alphabets at a time, and consider a key which is a m alphabets. A key is a string of m alphabets. So by considering a plain text into a blocks of m alphabets and getting a key with m string of length m, you can make a function from the plain text to the ciphertext. So what is the advantage here? So here the possible values of key is higher. In Caesar cipher there are only 25 possible keys, and in the affine cipher there are maximum, I can say, n square possible keys. And here if I consider m bigger and bigger, my possible keys are bigger. Therefore the intruder has to check all the keys. When you have more and more keys, it becomes more and more difficult for the intruder to decipher the message. So this Vigenère cipher will help us to increase. So it's saying that increase the key alphabets. Increase the key. That's what we do here. It's suppose my m is 6. I take the keyword cipher. So that is our keyword. Therefore, if I replace each alphabet by an integer, we get 2, 8, 15, 7, 4, 17, which is our keyword here for the encryption. Suppose we want to encrypt this message. This crypto system is secure. What I do, we first replace characters by integers, corresponding integers, and then we use this multi-key to encrypt the message. So what I do, I replace 19, I add 19 with 2 for the first time. I add 8, second number with 8. I add third number with 15, fourth number by 7, fifth number by 4, and the sixth one by 17. And the seventh number I can add with 2. So so the idea is I have a block. I divide the plain text into blocks, and I encrypt each block separately. So in each block will have a different key, and with respect to the key, I encrypt each block. So block-wise decipher. So we can generalize business cipher as follows. So there is no guarantee that you need to have M. So I mean the business. So when you fix M, your plain text is you can think of plain text as a M tuple of elements from Z over N is Z, and ciphertext is also M tuple of elements from the element Z over N is Z. And once you have a sequence of integers of length M, you can define the encryption function as follows. F of x1, x2, xm is shifted to x1 plus k1. First integer add first integer by k1, second integer by k2, third integer by k3, and so on. For decrypt the message, once you have the ciphertext message, you subtract each block separately. The first element of the first block will be subtracted by minus k1, and the second element by k2, and so on. And again, we can see that. So once you go, I mean, these two functions are one inverse to each other. So when we apply F and F inverse, we get back our plain text again. Okay. So this is one way of making our job difficult. So there is another way. So far we named each plain text message as an integer. So we name each plain text message as an integer, and then as a single unit or M tuple, we have a different, I mean, depending on that, we have a key to encrypt the message. So now we make the job difficult by considering the plain text as a matrix. So we can suppose our plain text is no answer. So what do I do? Suppose I want to construct a 2 cross 1 matrix. That means a column matrix of length 2. I divide the plain text into two objects, two characters, and then I consider by considering the corresponding integers, I make a matrix, column matrix out of that. We can see that N corresponds to 13 and O corresponds to 14. Therefore, I write this complete NO corresponds to the column 13, 14. And similarly, AN corresponds to the column matrix 0, 30. And SW corresponds to the matrix 18, 22. And ER corresponds to 14, 7, 14, 7, 4, 7. Okay, so once we did that, so the labeling is done. So we can do many labeling. So the labeling is done. So how do we do the encryption? So here the labels are, what are they? The labels are 2 cross 1 matrices. So so we need to define functions in such a way that this matrix to matrix function will happen. So the well-known matrix operation we know is a matrix multiplication. So what I do, I take a 2 cross 2 matrix, 2, 3, 7, 8. Let's take a 2 cross 2 matrix, 2, 3, 7, 8. Then what I do, to convert each plain text into a ciphertext, I multiply the plain text by A. So to convert this plain text, I multiply A with this plain text to get the ciphertext. So by multiplying A with this first plain text, I get the first plain text. So multiplying A with the second plain text, I get the corresponding ciphertext and so on. So now this is your plain text. Sorry, this is your ciphertext. This is a ciphertext. So we now to write back, so we just write the corresponding characters: 16 for Q, 21 for V, 13 for N, 0 for A, and so on. We get the ciphertext in characters. So this is our character. So here we use matrix multiplication to encipher our plain text. Okay, so let's go back to our question. I started with a matrix A. So we can ask the question whether any matrix can do the encryption. Can we choose any matrix A? The answer is no. So we need to choose matrix A so that the determinant, if the determinant value of A should be co-prime to N. Should be co-prime to N. So the determinant of A and N should be co-prime to N. So why is that we need determinant A and N should be co-prime? It's because we need an inverse function to exist. So as we discussed earlier, whenever we define a function, we also take care of the inverse function. We should have an inverse function. If the determinant A and N are not co-prime, we cannot define an inverse function. There is no inverse function problem. So we'll not get into detail into that, why we don't have inverse. But to define an encryption in matrix form, we need to choose a matrix A whose determinant and N are co-prime. So once we get the ciphertext, then how do you decipher? So we write each ciphertext into a sequence of column matrices, and then to decipher, what we do, we multiply by A inverse. For enciphering, we multiply by A. For deciphering, we multiply by A inverse. So by multiplying with, we choose the first column and multiplying with A inverse, we get this. And we choose a second column vector and multiply with A inverse, we get this. And similarly, third one we get, and fourth and so on. And we can see that when we rewriting integers by alphabets, we get no answer again. Now we can sense that this crypto system is somewhat difficult to decipher because someone needs to know A, what is A, and to encipher this system. And again, because we are working on Z over N is Z, the integers are Z over N is Z. So there are only finitely many A which has inverse. There are finitely many integers which has inverse, and there are only finitely many matrices we supposed to check. But of course, it is certainly difficult than the shift cipher and affine cipher. So if we want to write it in a more systematic form, we write the above example as this. So we can consider our plain text as a set of all 2x1 matrices with elements from Z over N Z. And my ciphertext also 2x1 set of all space of all 2x1 matrices with elements from Z over N Z. And I define a function, encryption function in this way. My f of xy is equal to A into xy. My A is a 2x1 matrix, so 2x2 matrix with determinant co-prime to N. And my F inverse is, so F inverse of UV is A inverse times UV. So these functions F and G, they are inverses to each other. So this is a typical way of writing a matrix encryption. For example, let's see an example, a good example. Let's take, suppose you want to encrypt a message 920. So that is our plain text. I choose a matrix A. 11, 8, 13, 7. We can check that. So here, determinant of A and 26. Here, this example, we are considering English alphabets. They are co-prime to each other. We can check that they are co-prime to each other. So I fix a key. This is our key. A is a key. So using the key to encrypt the message 920, you just need to multiply A with the plain text message. By multiplying that, what will you get? You will get 99 plus 60 and 72 plus 140. So this is 159. But remember, we are working modulo 26. So modulo 26, which is 3. So how do we add? If you want to add 2 elements, you add and divide the remainder, divide the result with 26. So the remainder is the impact addition. And for this, we get 4. Therefore, the encrypted message is 3, 4. So we got the encrypted message 3, 4. So the corresponding decryption message, we just need to multiply by A inverse. So the A inverse is 7, 8, 23, 11. So multiplying A inverse with the ciphertext 3, 4. Ciphertext 3, 4, we get the plain text 7, 2. So remember, that is precisely where we started. 920 is the plain text. When you multiplying with A inverse, we get 920. Correct. So now we can ask the question, why 2 cross 2 matrix? So here we consider we convert the plain text into a 2 cross 1 column matrix. So there is no need, there is no restriction to convert a plain text into a 2 cross 1 column matrix. We can do you can do, for example, 10 cross 1 column matrix, 15 cross 1 column matrix. But the only thing we need to notice, when you increase the column, the size of A increases. So when you name your plain text by a 10 cross 1 matrices, column matrices, your A is a 10 cross 10 matrix. So doing computation might be becoming difficult for us. Even for the third person, it is difficult for him to encrypt that. So that's what I'm saying here. There is no restriction that we need to represent our plain text as a 2 cross 1 matrix. For any given integer m, we group plain text into blocks. We separate the plain text into blocks, and by writing the corresponding integer equivalents, we have for each block we have a m cross 1 column matrix. Therefore, a plain text can be thought of as a space of all, be an element in the collection of all m cross 1 column matrices. And similarly, my ciphertext is also a space of all m cross 1 column matrices. So now, how do we define the encryption? We need an invertible matrix. So if you choose any invertible matrix, m cross m invertible matrix with elements from Z over n Z, we'll do our encryption. That is f of x is equal to ax, and the decryption is A inverse into 1. So the bigger number m we choose, the better security we have. Because the number of the A becomes m cross m matrices, so that is becoming bigger and bigger matrix. So for example, 10 cross 10 matrix is bigger than 2 cross 2 matrix. So therefore, working with 10 cross n is a difficult problem. Okay, so far what we did, so far we can think of like what we did. We rename our plain text into a mathematical object, either by integer or by a sequence of integer or by a matrix. We name our plain text into a mathematical object, and ciphertext also the same mathematical object. And then we try to define a function from the plain text object to the ciphertext object. The only is the function f we define should have an inverse. That is the only condition we need to check. So this can be written in this way. So in a more general way, we can write this. The encryption function can be thought of as a map from P to C for every, whenever we have, so we choose a K from the space of all keys. key is a space of all keys. For each key in the space, we can define a map from P to C. We should have a defined map from P to C, so that there should be an inverse, so that Fk composition F inverse should be. So to define a new crypto system, what we need to find, we need to find a mathematical object to convert our plain text into a mathematical object, and then we need to find a function F from P to C, so that it has an inverse. So when we come up with a new function, whenever we come up with a new function Fk with these properties, we have a new crypto system. So is that my speed is okay, or am I too fast?
Okay, sir. It's
okay.
Yes.
So there are many private key crypto systems, because there are many abstract mathematical objects you can name. So, and you can define we can define there are natural functions between mathematical objects people study. Therefore, we can define many private key crypto systems. These are very few and basic crypto system we want to understand. Okay, so we move to a public key crypto system. That is the most important crypto system we want to study. Why we need public key cryptography? Why do we need that? Because we already have private key. Why do we need it? So we can note that in the crypto system we have seen so far, the decryption key is same as the encryption key, or a little, or it easily derived from the encryption key. For example, if you take the Caesar cipher, the encryption key is pi. Once we know the encryption key is pi, I know the decryption key, which is minus pi. And in the Wessner cipher, if I know the encryption key, I know the decryption key. We just need to take the negative of all integers. In the matrix encryption, the same thing. Once I know the encryption key, suppose somehow the third party knows the intruder knows the matrix A, which is the encryption key, we can find the inverse of A, which is a decryption key. So a system, if you know the encryption key, and if you are able to define a decryption key from the encryption key, then such a crypto system is called symmetric crypto system. That means the knowledge of encryption key and decryption key are the same. If you know one, we know the other. So if we such a crypto system is called symmetric. But there are drawbacks in that. One is a security issue, and the other one is, suppose if two people wants to communicate to each other, a priori they should have met before to share the key. So it is impossible in practical situation. So if you want to, every time if you want to share a message, it is not. So there are many private key crypto systems there. You need to change your key often, so that to make sure the security. But there are logistic issues to meet in person to share the secret key. So that is the thing. So one drawback for symmetric key is that it requires prior communication between two people, Alice and Bob, over a secure channel. So they should meet each other, or they should have shared a key through a secure channel to communicate each other. So the idea behind the public key crypto system is the thing. So we want to define a crypto system, and two people can communicate to each other without meeting each other, and also the knowledge of one information, for example, encryption key, will not guarantee the knowledge of decryption key. So that is what we want. Okay, so throughout public cryptography, we always talk about Alice and Bob, and Bob always wants to send a message to Alice. So that is a situation. That is the situation we fix. So Bob always want to send a message to Alice through public key crypto system. Okay. So just small history, and so public key crypto system was first invented, put forward by Diffie and Hellman. So we are going to see Diffie-Hellman key exchange in a moment. And the famous RSA crypto system was invented by Rivers, Shamir, and Fidelman. What we need in public key crypto? What is our demand? Is the following. So I have a plain text. I have a ciphertext. I want to define a function from F to F from P to C. For me, converting a plain text into a ciphertext should be easier. So that is one thing, because every time we cannot do a hard computation to change our plain text into a ciphertext. But to compute the inverse function, C to P should be very hard. I repeat again, the basic idea of public key cryptography is to find a function F from P to C, from the plain text to the ciphertext. F should be easy to compute, but however, F inverse should be very hard to compute. Very, very hard to compute. But if you have extra piece of information if you have one extra piece of information, then the F inverse should be easy to find. So that extra piece of information, we always keep it ourselves. So for us, F inverse is easy to find, but not for others, because they may not know the extra piece of information, trapdoor information. So we want to construct such a crypto system. F should be easier, F inverse should be hard, but F inverse should be easy as well if you know your extra trapdoor information. So how do we do that? So we start with the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Okay, we start with the problem of sharing a key without meeting each other. So remember, we want to address that question: how Bob and Alice share a secret key without meeting each other. So we always assume that Bob and Alice communicate each other through an insecure channel. So there is always a intruder, a third person always have access to the communication between Bob and Alice. But still, the crypto system ensures that whatever the information they share between Bob and Alice, the third person should not be able to share. Even though he gets all the ciphertext communication, he should not be able to decrypt the ciphertext to get a plain text. Okay, so the first Diffie-Hellman key exchange answers our first question. So how Bob and Alice shared a secret key without meeting each other. Okay, so before doing that, we make a couple of mathematical assumptions. Okay, suppose Alice and Bob wants to share some information, some secret key. So what I do, so we always choose a prime key, large enough, usually large enough prime, and always choose an integer g from 1 to p minus 1. But there is not all integers. My g should be equal to this. So I should choose g in such a way that if I consider 1 g square, g cube, g to the power p minus 2, I should get all the elements from 1 to p minus 1. So I should choose g in such a way that, for example, suppose I choose p equal to 5. Suppose I choose p equal to 5. Then what is my z over pz star, which is 1, 2, 3, 4. So remember, I should choose g. So that my 1 g square and so on should be equal to this set. So here I can choose g equal to 2. Here I choose g equal to 2. Why is that? Let's consider 1, 2, 2 square, 2 cube. What is this set? This set is equal to 1, 2, 2 square is 4. And what is 2 square? So 2 cube is 8, but 8 modulo 5 is 3. So we get back our set z over p z star. So you can choose 2 here as well. And G can be 3 also. G can be 3 also. G can be 3 also. So let's check whether G can be 3. If you have 1, 3, 3 square, 3 cube. So which is 1, 3. 3 square is 9. Modulo 5 is 4. 3 cube is 25. Modulo 5 is 2. So we get again the set Z over P. Z over 5Z, which is 1, 2, 3. So here G can be 2 and G can be 3. So we always have an element G. However bigger prime you choose, whatever bigger prime you choose, however bigger prime is choose, we can always find an element G, so that if we have 1 G square up to G to the power P minus 2, we get back the set Z by P Z star. And here 2 works as well. In many of the cases, 2 works. 2 works for many cases. And still we don't know whether how many times 2 works in this way. For how many primes P, if we multiply 1, 2, 2 square, 2 to the power P minus 2, we get the set Z by P Z star. We don't know that. So once we know that quantity, and it is easy for us to solve the Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Okay, so just that is just a history. So I'm just ensuring that, believe me, we can always find an integer G. Excuse me, 1 second. 1 second. We can always find an element G, so that the set 1 G square and G to the power P minus 2 is always 1 to P minus 1. So we can very well assume that such an integer G always exists. Okay. So now go back to our Diffie-Hellman key exchange. We are very curious about how do they change a secret key without meeting each other. So what do they do? First of all, they agree with the prime P. They agree with the prime P and they agree with the integer G. The integer G should satisfy the property, what I just said. And how do they agree with P and G? They can publish by paper, or they can communicate over insecure channel, whatever. So this P and G, we can assume that known to everyone. So this P and G known to everyone, in particular known to Bob and Alice. So then what do they do? First step, Alice choose an integer a secret integer A, which is known only to Alice. And similarly, Bob choose a secret integer B, which is known only to Bob. So after choosing an integer A, Alice computes G to the power A, and Bob computes G to the power B. So after computation, Alice sends G to the power A to Bob. Alice sends G to the power A, which is A, to Bob. And Bob sends the number which he computed, G to the power B, to Alice. So remember, now the intruder knows the integer capital A and capital B as well. But the only information the intruder may not know is a small integer A and small integer B. The secret number, the A is only known for Alice and B is only known for Bob. So after receiving G to the power A, after Alice receives G to the power A, what she does, she computes B to the power A. Alice receives B from Bob. And A is, that is her secret key. She computes B to the power A. And Bob receives A from capital A from Alice, and she computes A to the power A. Sorry, A to the power B. Separately, they compute this B to the power A and A to the power B separately. Interestingly, see that this b to the power a, which is b to the power a is, what is b? B is g to the power b, and to the power a, which is g to the power ba. And this a to the power b is also g to the power a. So after computation, they have the same number. They have the same number with them. They have this, Alice has this, Bob has this. They are same number. But they never met each other. But they have a common number with them. So that they use that common number as a secret key to do the encryption. So remember, suppose, so how do we ensure that the intruder may not know the common secret value? How do we ensure that he may not know the secret value? So remember, in order to know the secret value, g to the power ab, and remember, Bob the intruder knows small b, sorry, capital B and capital A as well. So because we are communicating through the insecure channel, so the intruder know capital A and capital B, but still it is difficult to find the secret value. So suppose the intruder knows A. The A is g to the power A. The intruder knows A, g to the power A. But what is the secret value? G to the power AB. So how do we compute g to the power AB from g to the power A? How do we compute g to the power A from g to the power G? How do we compute g to the power AB from g to the power A? He has to know B value. Once he knows B value, he can raise the power B. It will give g to the power AB. And similarly, the intruder knows g to the power B as well. And in order to know this g to the power AB, he has to know A value. So knowing at least one integer A or B will permit them to find the secret shard value. That means they know g to the power A, they know g to the power A and g to the power B, but they don't know the small integer A and B, because that is secret with Alice and Bob respectively. Alice only knows small a and Bob only knows small b. So, but how difficult is that? So we ask the question, how difficult is to solve this problem? Suppose I have suppose my g is 2 and somebody gives me g to the power, so somebody modulo 26 and considering that. Suppose somebody gives me a g, so my A is 10 and B is 8. So the intruder knows g to the power 10 and g to the power 8. And the secret shard value is g to the power 10 into 8. But from this existing value, someone has to find this g to the power 10 into 8. For that, they have to know at least 10 or 8. But that is secret with Alice and Bob. So such a problem is called a discrete log problem. That means finding, we know g to the power A. From g to the power A value, can we retract the value A, small a? And similarly, from the given value g to the power B, can we retract the integer small b? So that problem is called discrete log problem. So I will define it in a moment. Okay, let's see an example before defining the discrete log problem. Let's see an example. Suppose Alice and Bob decided to choose use the number prime p equal 941, and they also fix with the integer g. So g is 627, and we can check that. You can also check by writing a program. Is that when you z over 1, 2, 3 and so on, which is 940 or 1 to 940, which is in fact equal to 1 627 square and 627 into 939. So this set is in fact equal to this. So they agree with the prime P and the integer G, which is 627. So now how do they do? So they want to share a secret key. So as I mentioned there, so Alice computes G to the power A. So Alice chooses the secret integer 347 and Bob chooses his secret integer 781. And first Alice computes G to the power A, which is 627 power 347. So modulo 941, which is 390. So now Alice has the value 390. And similarly, Bob computes G to the power B, so which is 627 power 781 modulo 941. So which is 691. So Bob has the value 691. So now they communicate each other. So Alice sends 390 to Bob, Alice sends 390 to Bob, and Bob sends 691 to Alice. So after they receive the number, Alice take that given number, 691 she received 691. And then she raised that number by 347 by her secret integer. So she keep that integer, whatever she computes. And similarly, Bob receives 390 and raise it with the secret integer 781. She gets the same value. And as we know, they should have the same number, 470. So that is their secret key. So suppose, as I said before, suppose the intruder Eve sees the entire exchange. In order to know what is this number, 470, either she has to solve this problem or this problem. She knows 627 also. She knows this, she knows this, she knows this, everything she knows. But the integer A, she may not. And similarly, everything they know, but integer B, they may not. In order to know A, they have to solve this problem. So that precisely the problem of this kind is called discrete log problem. I define it in a proper way. Let's take P be a prime number, large enough usually, and G be an integer between 0 to P minus 1, so that the set 1 G square G to the power P minus 2 is equal to 1, 2, 3 up to P minus 1. Suppose your G is given and H is given. The problem of finding an integer X so that G to the power X equal to H modulo P is called a discrete log problem. It's called a discrete log problem. It is similar to the logarithm, what we know, the usual logarithm, but here the logarithm in Z by P is Z. So that is the only. So logarithm is, you can think of like the logarithm in Z by P. So the basic idea is the one way is e to the power x. Finding exponential function is easy, and finding the reverse function, which is log function, is difficult. So we make use of that idea to define a cryptography. So in order to break this crypto system, someone needs to solve this discrete log problem. But as long as we know we only have a sub-exponential complexity to solve this problem, we need at least the best known algorithm solve this problem in sub-exponential time. So we are secure. So if we choose large prime P and a large integer G, and if you share secret value through this Diffie-Hellman key exchange, we are secure. It's difficult for others to. Yeah. Okay. Now we move to the Elgamal public key crypto system. Yeah. So remember, in the Elgamal Diffie-Hellman key exchange, there they share a secret value. They have a secret value to. They want to share a secret value without meeting each other. But that is not the only problem we have in the cryptography. So we want to send a message to someone in a secret way. So that Elgamal public key crypto system will answer a question in a way which also uses a discrete log problem as a base. So okay. So now remember, Bob wants to send a message. Bob wants to send a message to Alice. So you can think of like Alice is a server, and Bob is everyone. So everyone wants to send our secret message or our OTP to Alice. So you can think of like Alice as a single meeting point, and everyone wants to send a message to Alice. That's how I can think of. Okay, suppose Bob wants to send a message to Alice. So we need to do some public parameters. So we choose a large prime P and an integer G, so that the integer should be satisfies this 1 G square up to G to the power P minus 2 should be 0, 1, 2, 3 up to P minus 1. So we choose P and G and we make it public. Everyone knows P and G. So everyone can know we publish P and G. Now Alice wants to receive message from everyone. So what Alice does, Alice choose an integer A between 1 to P minus 1. And after choosing A, she computes G to the power A modulo P. She computes G to the power A modulo P and make A as public. So remember, so Alice choose an integer A, small a, which she keeps she keep it as secret, and the capital A, which is G to the power A, she make it as public. Now this capital A, everyone knows capital A. Okay. So now Bob wants to send a message. So now Bob send him, suppose Bob wants to send a message small m. So that is a string of integers. M is a string of integers. To send a message to Alice, what Bob does, Bob chooses a temporary integer k. So the k will not do anything in the encryption, but it will not alter the encryption. So which he can choose any integer k. After choosing the integer k, he chooses the public information available from Alice. The Alice publishes A. So he take the public information and the k also, the secret, the random ephemeral key. Bob computes two integers. Bob computes two integers. What are they? First, he computes G to the power k. Remember, G is known to everyone, P is known to everyone, K because Bob chooses, so he can compute G to the power K modulo P. That is, we call it as C1. And also computes another integer, which is M into A to the power K. So remember, what is M? M is a message he wants to send, and A is the public information. Everyone knows, therefore Bob also knows. So K is known to Bob because he chooses that. So he computes M into A to the power K, which is C2. Now Bob sends this message C1, C2 to Alice. That means he sends this number, G to the power K and M into A to the power K. So remember, it is interesting to see M is hidden here. Yeah, this is a number. After multiplying that, we have a number, and here is a number. So the Eve also knows that they communicate through DPL LGML public encryptor system, and he only knows C1 and C2, which is G to the power K, M and A to the power K. Okay. So this information Bob sends to Alice. Now Bob has to encrypt that. So Bob has to encrypt that message to see what Bob said. Sorry, Alice has to encrypt that message to see what Bob has sent. So what Alice can do, she chooses the first integer C1 and compute C1 to the power A. She can do because A is known to Alice. A is a secret key which is known to Alice. Remember, she can do this because A is known to Alice. Because A is known, C1 she received from Bob, C2 she received from Bob. Therefore, she can compute C1 A to the power inverse, and C2 also she can compute. Therefore, she can multiply these two numbers. And we can see that this multiplication in fact gives M. In fact gives M. So how is that? Why is that? Let's see that. Let's see why is that. C1 to the power A inverse into C2. So whether what is C1? G to the power K. A to the power inverse. So what is C2? My C2 is m into a to the power k. My a is g to the power a. So we can see that which is g to the power ak inverse into m into g to the power ak, which is equal to m into g to the power ak. G to the power ak inverse is g to the power minus ak. We get g to the power ak. So we get m into g to the power 0, which is m. So Alice retracts the message. Okay. Now we are under the assumption that Eve knows everything. Whatever the communication they make, they know everything. So what is the probability that, what is the possibility that Eve can decrypt the message? What are the possibilities to decrypt the message? We can see that Eve has to know the integer a. Once she knows integer, small integer a, she can decrypt the message. But how does he know capital A? Sorry, small a. Because he knows capital A as well. From capital A, she's supposed to find small a. That is precise. Remember, a is equal to g to the power a modulo p. Eve knows this, Eve knows this, Eve knows this, everything she knows. Only small a she yet to know. So from this equation, if she could solve small a, she can decrypt the message as Alice does. But it is a difficult problem. If we choose P bigger and G is bigger, not bigger, optimally, it is a difficult problem to solve. Therefore, the security of the Elgamal public key crypto system depends on the discrete logarithm. So discrete logarithm, so we can think of like we have a difficult problem in mathematics. So using that difficult problem, we try to define a crypto system on that. Because it's a difficult problem, no one can be able to decrypt that, can solve that. No one knows to solve the problem optimally. Therefore, the security is good. So that let's see an example for the Elgamal public key crypto system. Okay, suppose P equal to 467 and G equal to be two public information. So Alice and Bob decides to use each other. These are public information they use. And Bob wants to send this message. Bob wants to send this message 331. So what is the first step in Elgamal public key crypto system? Alice has to publish a key. So to publish a key. So what Alice does to publish a public key, she first chooses a secret key 153, which she will keep it with her as secret. So she chooses 153. After choosing 153, she computes g to the power a. Here g is 2, so 2 to the power 153, which is 244. So now this 244 is a public information. Sorry for this, it's 244. So 224 is Alice public key. So she publishes 224. So everyone knows 224 now. Now remember, Bob also sent a message. So now Bob also knows 224 and he wants to send the message 331. He wants to send the message 331. Remember, Bob computes two integers, C1 and C2. And C1 is g to the power k which is 2 to the power 197, which is 87 modulo 467. And he computes C2, which is m into a to the power k. M is 331, the message, and capital A is 224 to the power k, which is 197. So she computes, which is 57. So after computing the values, she collect the numbers 87 and 57 and send this number to Alice. So remember, Alice, the plain text is 331, but what Alice received is 87 and 57. So in order to get back the 331, so we know that how do we calculate? She has to compute C1 to the power A from C1, which she can because this A is known to Alice. No one knows that. So after computing C1 to the power A, and she computes C2 to the power C1A inverse, which will give 331, which is the plain text what Bob wants to send to Alice. So if someone, as I repeat again, if someone wants to crack this filter system, they have to know A. They have to know small a to solve this. If they know A, then they can solve this filter system.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, I think around 5 to 10 minutes are left for this session.
Okay, sir. I will finish with the RSA public key cryptography.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Okay.
So it will complete a kind of a public key cryptography.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Yeah. So there are two protocols we have seen. So which is Elgamal public key cryptography system and Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and both the protocols depend on the difficulty of the discrete log problem. So there are many problems in classical mathematics which are hard to solve. One among them is factoring integers. So factoring given integers into a primes is a very difficult problem, classical and difficult problem to solve. So the RSA cryptography uses that problem to define a public key cryptography. So I just briefly discuss the crypto system. So to do the encryption using RSA, so remember the same setup. Bob wants to send a message to Alice, and Alice will form a public key, and she will make it as public, and everyone, whoever has the public key, they can send a message to Alice, but Alice can only decrypt the message. So that is the setup we want to form here. So the setup is, the first we choose two primes P and Q, large enough, very, very large enough. And we can take the product of two primes n equal to P. So what we do here, the secret is the integers P and Q. The secret is integers P and Q. What is public is the product. Okay. So what Alice does, so Alice chooses two primes P and Q, and also chooses a small integer . So what Alice does to make a public key, so she chooses two primes P and Q, large enough, and she keep it herself. That is a secret one. First, she computes P into Q, that is capital N. We call it as capital N. And she chooses a small integer. Sorry. And she chooses an integer E, which is co-prime to P minus 1 into Q minus 1. Which is co-prime into P minus 1 into Q minus 1. So now Alice publishes the integer capital N and the integer E. So everyone knows capital N and E. Now Bob wants to send a message M. What he does, he computes the he raised the plain text into the integer E. He computes M to the power E modulo P. and that is the ciphertext. So that is m to the power e is a ciphertext. So he sends m to the power e to this information to Alice. So once Alice receives m to the power e, he has to get m again. So Alice receives m to the power e. They know m to the power e. But how to remove e to get m? So now the extra piece of information comes into the picture. Because remember, Alice knows both the integers p minus 1 and q minus 1. Because they know p and q. Because they know p and q, they know p minus 1 and q minus 1. And because e is co-prime to p minus 1 and q minus 1, because the integer e is co-prime to p minus 1 and q minus 1, now we can apply our Euclidean algorithm. Which we studied in the beginning by applying Euclidean algorithm. To find d so that ed is congruent to 1 modulo p minus 1 into q minus 1. So she can find the integer d by applying Euclidean algorithm so that e into d is 1 modulo p minus 1 into q minus 1. Now she chooses that integer d and raise the ciphertext by d. Because she received c from Bob, she raised c to the power d. She finds c to the power d. And we can see that c is m to the power e, therefore, which is m to the power ed. And we know also that ed is 1 modulo p minus 1 into q minus 1. We get m again. So because this is 1, therefore we get m. So Alice receives m. So what is it? Suppose, remember, so Eve knows all the communications. So she knows C as well. In order to get M back, she has to know what is D. So how do we find D? So she has to find D so that E into D is 1 modulo P minus 1 and Q minus 1. But what is this? This is P minus 1 and Q minus 1. Once we know P minus 1 and Q minus 1, we can find D. But Alice knows P minus 1 and Q minus 1. Not no other. Everyone knows N, not P and Q separately. So if somehow, if we factorize this integer, and we know P and Q separately. Once we know P, we know Q. We just divide N by P, we know Q. And then once you know P and Q, we just find N, D, and then raise the ciphertext by D. You will get the plain text again. So the whole security of this RSA public key crypto system depends on this singular problem. Factoring N is, this information is known to everyone. We need to somehow factor N. We need to factor N. The intruder knows how to factor captain. Once he achieves that, he can crack the RSA public key crypto system. Let's see an example. Last example. Okay, so first public key setup. So Alice chooses the prime P 1223 and another prime Q 1987 and an integer E. Alice computes PQ as well and find the integer E which is co-prime to P minus 1 to Q minus 1 and makes this integer E and this integer N which is 242689. So she makes this number and this number as public. So not this P and Q. So P and Q she will keep it as So only N and P are public. And now comes to the Bob side. So Bob wants to send this message 1070777. So what she does, she just raised the plain text to the power E, because E also knows to everyone. E is a public information. So and compute the value modulo P minus 1 into P minus 1, which is 2430101, and sends this information C to Alex. C is this, sends C to Alex. And because Alex knows P and Q, therefore she knows P minus 1 and Q minus 1 as well. And because she knows E, of course, everybody knows E, and she is the one who computed. And by using Euclidean algorithm, she can find D, so that E into D is 1 modulo P minus 1 into Q minus 1. And raise the ciphertext by D, as I mentioned in the algorithm. Raise the ciphertext by D, you will get the plain text. You will get the plain text. So there are many problems, mathematical problem. For example, the one discrete log problem we defined in the set Z by P Z star, we can define discrete log problem in many other setup. For example, points on curves. We can take special curves and we define points on it. We consider special points, special curve over special domain, and those we can define a discrete log problem for those points. Like DLP, the DLP in this setup also difficult. So we can analogously define Diffie-Hellman key exchange and Elgamal public crypto system using elliptic curves as well. So curves, in particular elliptic curves. So that is called elliptic curve public crypto system. So ECC. So these RSA and ECC are widely used public crypto systems. Because I don't have time to discuss ECC. So the basic underlying idea is the same. Both the underlying idea of Diffie-Hellman and Elgamal public crypto system is same. The only change is we need to have a group structure in that. So we have a group structure for elliptic curves over time. So I stopped here. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for discussing the mathematical foundations for cryptography. And I hope this will definitely benefit all the participants in the upcoming talks. So
sir, I will share the PDF also, which I have written for ECC, so that the interested.
Yeah. Yes, sir. In fact, many participants wrote in the chat that they need this your notes.
I will immediately share.
You share with me. I will share with all the participants.
Sure, sir.
Yeah. Any participants? Do you have any question? Yeah. Sir will share the PPT, the notes, and I will share with all of you. And any questions? Any participant?
Yeah. Hello.
Hi.
Very good afternoon. I'm Ashish. So I have a question with speaker. Yeah. Sure. Even quite just in a descriptive manner have presented the idea of cryptography. So, sir, can you tell some research challenges for the beginners? Those are interested in the field of cryptography. So what are the research area mainly that they will go for that? I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah. So like in both, I'm not an expert in the sense that well mastered in cryptography, but with the knowledge what I gained so far, I can say that you can for the crypto system. So the underlying structure is you need to have a group structure in that. Yeah. Or in the private key crypto system, the naming, we name characters by mathematical objects. So the mathematical objects can be anything. So it can be vectors, or it can be, there are many interesting abstract mathematical objects to name. So we can look for any good mathematical object to encrypt the message. And once we do the labeling, and there are well-studied functions in mathematics. So people study many functions on mathematics. So we can look for a functions which is hard to compute and very difficult to invert it. Like the public key crypto system, we can think of like you can define the discrete log problem for any group as well. So the one which we defined is a abelian group, and for the non-abelian group, there is a recent research people are defining crypto system for non-abelian groups. So the challenges is because the two elements never commute, so it become a harder problem there. So it is people are still, I mean, it's a hard topic.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for it.
Any other participant? No. Okay. Okay, then thank you all, and thank you, Subramani sir, for sharing your knowledge with the participants. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your invitation and for the opportunities.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And dear participants, next session we will start at 4 o'clock. So please take a small break and join back at around 3:55. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.